Therefore, since the relationship between these two is a higher to a lower, and now that lower becomes a higher in respect to this, how could we express that simply? Look here. The higher is to the lower. And that lower becomes a higher to its lower. Well, that's interesting. Higher is to its lower, which in turn becomes a higher to its lower. Well, then we have something like this then, don't we? We have this. A higher is to its lower, which in turn becomes a higher to its lower. Therefore, that middle term is a mean between the two extremes. That's a mean analogy. That's a mean analogy. That defines a mean analogy. Wait a minute. That means there must be, very simply said, however we decide on the quantities, that there must necessarily be a ratio between these two. A ratio, of course, is the way two things relate in some principle. Equally well, there must be some ratio between these and some ratio between these in a descending scale. Like this. Look here. Let me look. It's exactly like this then. A is to B as B is to C, as C is to D, as D is to E. See, that's a mean analogy. The mean terms being the same, just as we showed here. Now we can take this as an analogy. Mean terms are the same. Hey, we can take this as an analogy. Mean terms are the same. Therefore, we have a descending scale of mean analogies, don't we? Now look here, the principle behind each one of these. Now there is a principle behind each one of these because something emerges that has great vitality since it's capable of producing something and brings something into existence that formerly wasn't in existence. That's a likeness to itself. That means, therefore, there is some... Now, here's the word ratio. It's a very curious word, right? I'm going to use the Greek for it, all right? Ratio. Logos. That's the logos. Which in the Gospel of John, in the beginning was the Word. The Word, that's logos. Same word, ratio. Therefore, inherent at each level, the way we can talk about each level, therefore, is that each particular division has its own unique logos. That takes on the form of mean analogy. Now, look here. What is it about a ratio, logos, that's so interesting? Well, if it's an object, didn't we say a moment ago, it's the object of desire on every level? There's an object of desire. The only reason it's an object of desire is obviously if you desire something, only desire it because it's good and beautiful. Otherwise, you wouldn't desire it. That means surrounding each logos is beauty, necessarily. For beauty is nothing other than manifestation of the good on a particular level. That's all. Now look here, would you not agree all we need is one more step just to wrap this up a little bit? Anytime you see something that you recognize that's beautiful, and it inherently has intelligibility, and it foreshadows a good in some hierarchical significance, you're attracted to it and you want to get into it. You want to grab it, you want to embrace it, you want to share in it, you want to participate in it. Therefore, the power that pulls these things successively up and draws the person upward is eros, love. So therefore, the basic power behind the whole thing is not love divorced from beauty, but necessarily beauty is the thing which makes it so attractive and spurs us all into it. Right? The whole problem in philosophy is nothing else but to try to persuade people who haven't known it, or haven't seen it, or haven't experienced, or haven't guessed it, that higher reality is more beautiful than the one you're in, wherever you are. That's all. And there ought to be some way of going successively from each one to the higher. And that's the training of the philosopher king, or the training of the philosopher in the Platonic tradition. Now this shows itself up in many, many great works of literature. The Platonic tradition started, as you know, way back in the days of Parmenides, continued all the way up. Now we're going into a little bit of history. Now bringing history. The system spread, and then a new system came into history. Not entirely new, but sufficiently different to challenge it, and that was Christianity. Now, Christianity, from the earliest days, we're talking about the 2nd century on. This is the view of Christianity from the 2nd century on to the 17th century. It's called parallel revelation. As you all know, the great game started with Moses. And following him were the prophets, all the way down, and you can put in some great figures, including Philo the Jew, or Philo of Alexandria, whichever name you like to call him by. Then Jesus, right? Paul. His companion, of course, was Dionysius. And there was Origen and Tertullian, and the list goes on. Oh, by the way, this is revelation based upon faith. Belief. Now, from the 2nd to the 17th century, it was believed that parallel to this at the same time was Hermes Trismegistus. Pythagoras. And a whole line of Greek thinkers, until you get to the more familiar names of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Now we can go on, get other names, Pausanias, Pausanias, but Cyrenius, Plotinus, just to hit a couple of high ones. Porphyry, Iamblichus, Proclus,